Join our family of creators. Your support means the world to us. Subscribe now to the Content Creator channel. Your support keeps us motivated and helps us bring you fresh, exciting content every week. Hit that subscribe button and be part of our journey. Did you know that at one point American businesses and consumers were paying an extra $3 billion? We're paying an extra $3 billion every single month? No, that wasn't a subscription for a streaming service you forgot to cancel. No, that wasn't a subscription for a streaming service you forgot to cancel. Though, frankly, at that price it should come with every movie ever made and a live unicorn. This was the extra cost, tacked onto goods coming into the United States. All thanks to a little something called tariffs. It's a word that sounds incredibly boring. But it turns out, this sleepy little word has the power to reach directly into your wallet. Think of it like this. You order a pizza, you're excited. But when it arrives, the delivery guy says, "That'll be $20 for the pizza, and an extra $5 because my boss is in a bad mood with the pizza shop across town." You'd be furious, right? You'd say, "That's not my problem." Suddenly, the price of everything from steel for our buildings to the washing machine in your laundry room went up, and you were the one footing the bill, whether you knew it or not. It's the economic equivalent of finding a surprise anchovy on your pepperoni pizza. Nobody asked for it, and it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. This whole saga began with a promise. Alright, let's break this down because the word tariff is designed to make your brain shut off. It sounds like a rare species of mountain goat or a fancy French dessert. But a tariff is simply a tax. That's it. It's a tax that a government puts on stuff that is imported from other countries. There's a TV made in America for $500, and a similar one made in South Korea for $400. So, it slaps a 25% tariff on all TVs imported from South Korea. A 25% tax on that $400 TV is an extra $100. Suddenly, the South Korean TV costs $500 at the store. The government hopes you'll buy the American one, supporting a local factory. That, in a nutshell, is the entire theory behind tariffs. But here's the crucial, often misunderstood part. The country that sends the goods doesn't pay the tax. The company that imports the goods into the US is the one that has to pay the tax. And what does that company do? They pass that extra cost on to you, the consumer. It's a bit like punching yourself in the face and yelling, "See, that'll teach China." So, tariffs are a tool, like a hammer. In the right hands, a hammer can build a beautiful house. In the wrong hands, it can put a giant hole in your wall when you're just trying to hang a picture. So, armed with this powerful economic hammer, the Trump administration went on what can only be described as a tariff-imposing spree. It wasn't just one or two products, it was a broad, sweeping campaign that felt less like precise economic policy and more like someone playing whack-a-mole with global trade. The first major salvos were fired in early 2018. The administration announced steep tariffs of 25% on steel, 0.10% on aluminum. It didn't just target rivals like China, it hit close allies: China, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. The EU slapped tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, bourbon whiskey, and blue jeans. But the main event was with China. Round after round of tariffs covered hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. Everything from electronics, machinery, furniture, toys, to clothing. This wasn't a surgical strike, it was a carpet bombing of the supply chain. American companies that relied on Chinese parts were suddenly in a panic. So what did all this economic chest-thumping actually achieve? Well, if you look at the data, in 2022, the US trade deficit hit a record high of nearly $1 trillion. It's like going on a diet and gaining 10 pounds. The impact on prices was far more direct and, for the average person, far more painful. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found the full cost of the tariffs was passed on to importers and consumers. That extra $3 billion a month I mentioned earlier, that wasn't paid by China. It was paid by Americans. Rising prices showed up in goods like washing machines, which jumped nearly 12% after tariffs. American steel producers raised prices, their profits increased, and they hired some workers. But helping one sector hurt many others. Industries that use steel had to pay much more for raw material. Retaliatory tariffs hit American farmers hard. China virtually stopped buying US soybeans. Soybean prices plummeted. The US government spent tens of billions in bailout money to prevent farmer bankruptcies. To recap, we taxed Americans to raise money, then used it to pay farmers who couldn't sell crops because of the taxes we imposed in the first place. It's a circular logic that deserves a round of applause. If the American economy were a patient on an operating table, economists were the team of expert surgeons watching in horror as someone decided to perform surgery with a rusty chainsaw. The consensus among mainstream economists, from the left, right, and center, was overwhelmingly negative. They were practically screaming from the rooftops that this was a bad idea, including a letter signed by over 1,100 economists, including 15 Nobel laureates, urging the administration to avoid the mistakes of the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which famously deepened the Great Depression. They warned that tariffs are a blunt instrument that would harm the domestic economy more than they would help. One common refrain: trade wars are not good and are not easy to win. Mary Lovely, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute, put it bluntly: the U.S. tariffs have been almost completely passed through to U.S. domestic prices. The result is the tariffs have been a net negative for the U.S. economy. By alienating allies with tariffs on their steel and aluminum, the United States found itself fighting a trade war on multiple fronts, alone. A more effective approach would have been to work with allies through the WTO. Instead, potential teammates became adversaries. They argued tariffs were like using a sledgehammer to perform brain surgery. It was a strategic blunder that turned potential teammates into adversaries, leaving the U.S. isolated in its fight. The central promise of the tariffs was simple and powerful: bringing jobs back to America. The image was of shuttered factories roaring back to life. For some workers in very specific industries, there was a glimmer of hope. In the steel sector, U.S. Steel restarted a blast furnace, creating hundreds of jobs. For that community, it was a paycheck. However, that positive story for a few thousand workers was overshadowed by a much larger negative story for millions. For every job created in a steel mill, many more were lost or put at risk in industries that use steel: car manufacturers, construction, appliance makers. Retaliatory tariffs hit American farmers hard. Soybean prices collapsed and farmers were left with silos full of unsold crops. The government stepped in with a massive bailout package funded by taxpayers. A U.S.-China Business Council study found peak losses near 245,000 American jobs. A small number of winners in protected industries and a much larger number of losers in trade-dependent industries. For most American workers, they paid higher prices and faced greater job insecurity. Ultimately, the net effect on American jobs was negative. A trade war is never a contained event. It's like dropping a bowling ball into a swimming pool. The initial splash is big, but the ripples spread out and affect everything. A smartphone might have its screen made in South Korea, its processor in Taiwan, and its battery in China. This system was designed to be as cheap and efficient as possible. The tariffs threw a giant wrench into that finely tuned machine. This sent businesses scrambling to find alternatives, spending huge amounts of time and money trying to reconfigure their supply chains. Decoupling is incredibly difficult and expensive. You can't just find a new factory overnight. This uncertainty and cost made it much harder for American businesses to plan for the future. When a company doesn't know its costs next month, it becomes very hesitant to spend money on new factories or equipment. New employees and new equipment were put on hold. The tariffs damaged America's relationships with its closest allies: Canada, Germany, Japan. This weakened America's global standing and made it harder to build coalitions to challenge China. So we've established that the tariffs were costly, disruptive, and arguably a strategic failure. But does that mean they put the U.S. on the path to a full-blown economic meltdown? Could this one policy be the first domino in a chain reaction that leads to a recession, or worse? This is what happened in the 1930s with Smoot-Hawley, which deepened the Great Depression. While the tariffs did not on their own cause a recession, they absolutely increased the risk. They contributed to a global slowdown and created headwinds for the U.S. economy. Think of the economy as a car on the highway. The tariffs were like constantly tapping the brakes for no reason. You might not crash, but you're definitely slowing down and making the ride less comfortable for everyone. The tariffs added friction and uncertainty, making the economy more fragile and vulnerable to a shock. The biggest long-term risk is the erosion of the rules-based international trading system the U.S. helped build. This encourages other countries to do the same, leading to a world where economic power is based on might makes right. That would be a more chaotic, less prosperous, and more conflict-prone world. Let's recap. So, after all that, are we headed for an economic apocalypse brought on by tariffs? Are we destined to be living in a barter-based society, Trading squirrels for bootleg toilet paper? The answer for now is probably not. The US economy is massive and resilient, and it managed to absorb the initial shock without collapsing. But to say that everything is fine would be like saying the guy who just shot himself in the foot is fine because he didn't hit a major artery. The damage was real, widespread, and according to most experts, self-inflicted. The tariffs were sold as a magic potion that would cure America's economic ills. They helped a small number of workers in protected industries, but hurt a much larger number of workers in trade-dependent industries and in exports. They did not fix the trade deficit, they created massive uncertainty and slowed business investment. The whole episode is a powerful and very expensive lesson in economics. The choice is between rebuilding a cooperative, rules-based global system, or continuing down a path of economic nationalism and conflict. Are we heading for disaster? Maybe not tomorrow, but the tariffs have shown us just how easy it is to start walking down that road. The crucial question is whether future policy will be guided by hard data and cooperation, or the siren song of protectionism. The road is ours to choose.